So with the Sacred Seal Forge update, 3 new Sacred Seals have been introduced, and they are Deflect Melee, Deflect Missile, and Deflect Magic. And in this video, we're going to ask the question, are they worth it? So by that, we're going to go over exactly how they work, who they work against, and should you be upgrading them first. So if you are familiar with Brave Ike's Irvan and how his damage reduction works, then these are no different, they are just split into different damage types. If you do not, then basically the description reads, if a unit receives consecutive attacks from a foe using sword, lances, or axes for Deflect Melee, bows and daggers for Deflect Missile, and magic for Deflect Magic, then the damage from second attacks onward is reduced by 30, 50, and 80%, depending on the tier level of the Sacred Seal. Now the keyword is consecutive, and the easiest example of consecutive attacks is from Brave Weapons. So when Brave Weapons initiate, they automatically get 2 attacks, and because you can't interrupt these 2 attacks, the second hit will be considered a consecutive attack and will activate the damage reduction from these Deflect Sacred Seals. So Brave Weapons are not the only way you can get a consecutive attack. This could also be if a ranged unit attacks a melee unit and also doubles them, and since the melee unit can't counter the ranged unit usually unless you have distant counter, then the ranged unit's second hit will be considered a consecutive attack because it is not interrupted. So ideally these Sacred Seals are effective mostly against Brave Weapons, however they can be triggered in other situations. So now let's go over the individual Sacred Seals, starting with Deflect Melee. And first you have to know that it is restricted to only melee units, so no range units can even use the Sacred Seal, which is kind of a big deal, and it's the only one that has this restriction. Like I said before, it's effective against Brave Weapons and also Fire Sweep weapons, because if a Fire Sweep weapon user is fast enough to double attack your guy, then you can't counterattack back due to the Fire Sweep weapon's effect, and thus that second hit will be considered a consecutive attack and will get reduced damage. So another situation this can be used for is for slow attackers who want to initiate fights, and since they're slow, they have a good chance of being outsped by other people, so they'll get hit twice back. So you attack first, and they'll get hit twice back, and the second hit will get reduced damage, which is pretty good. This also works for quick riposte, the same idea. So if neither of the units outspeed each other, if you attack first and the enemy has quick riposte, they'll get 2 guaranteed hits back, and that second hit, since will be right after the first hit, it'll also get the reduced damage, which is pretty good. So I think Deflect Melee is probably one of the weakest of the group because once again it's restricted to only melee units. Imagine if your ranged units could have this, they could potentially survive a brave attack from an offensive melee unit, but that's not the case. Also, I think it's much easier to guard against defensive or physical defensive units at the moment. You can get a much higher defensive stat normally, and it's much harder to find units who have a high resistance stat. So for that, I would put more worth into Deflect Magic per se. I don't think Deflect Melee is bad, I just think you don't want to be upgrading it first. So next we have Deflect Missile, and again it's effective against Brave and Fire Sweep bows. It allows melee units without distant counter to survive multiple ranged attacks, and this is pretty good because melee units obviously normally can't counterattack, so they're at the mercy of these ranged units, and being able to survive a second attack is very worthwhile in my opinion, and having it reduced by 80% is actually a lot. So dagger users haven't been too much of an issue besides poison dagger, so that's why I don't think for that part of the effect, I don't think until they introduce some better daggers or better dagger users, I don't think it's really that much of an issue. We're mainly focusing on archers and what they can do with brave bows and fire sweep bows. So one of the best things I think that Deflect Missile has going for it is that in arena, brave and fire sweep bows are most common on most archers, so I think Deflect Missile gains a lot of effectiveness just against this one class. Because of the way that interaction works, you can definitely hinder some of these quad attacking brave bow builds from these high attack archers, and I think it's just really good because it shuts down the main offensive threat that archers had with brave bows and even fire sweep bows to an extent. I think it's also sort of a soft counter to Brave Lyn's K's Blessing, which if you didn't know negates distant counter effects, and I think that's pretty good to prevent your units from essentially just getting chipped away for free. I also think it's has the potential to hinder offensive archers, like I said, and honestly, for what I'll go over when I talk about Deflect Magic, I think Deflect Missile might actually be really strong. So for Deflect Magic, it's very effective against Reinhardt's Dire Thunder and against other fast mages even. So you can definitely allow your melee units to survive against speedy mages who double often, and if you have Brave Ike, then this definitely is effective. 80% is no joke. However, you have to watch out for mages who have insanely high buffed up attack. Even that is not going to save you. So this Sacred Seal basically is the Reinhardt counter. Reinhardt's Dire Thunder lets him attack twice just like a Brave weapon, and this has been the bane for many players. It's so strong when he's buffed up, and being able to reduce it by 80% is actually really good. If you have Brave Ike, he is essentially a made to counter Reinhardt despite not being able to attack him in range, but because if you put this Deflect Magic on a green unit, I guarantee you they have a way higher chance of surviving Reinhardt's assault. So like I mentioned with Deflect Melee, I think overall at the moment it is currently harder to counter magic than physical attacks, and so I think this gives Deflect Magic some points right there. However, if you want to put this on a range unit, then the range unit only gets affected if they attack first, and this is because because they're both range units. If they attack you first, you'll be able to counterattack back, and thus that will break the consecutive attack requirement. So besides Reinhardt, I think Deflect Magic is harder to use against other mages, even though there are a lot of speedy mages out there. Just because Reinhardt and Owen have Dire Thunder, which is a Brave weapon effect, and that's what these deflect skills are meant to be used for. They're meant to stop what Brave weapons can do by hitting you multiple times before you can even retaliate back. It is good for surviving magical attacks. I will say that from using Brave Ike, in my experience, even though he has quite a low resistance stat, he will survive against mages who hit him twice if they don't have insanely high attack, like I said before. So regarding all the Deflect Sacred Seals, they allow slower units to survive double attacks better. So for a slow melee unit, they can survive a fast ranged unit, probably tank both their hits without dying. It also counters the Moonbow plus Quick Impulse combo, essentially because Moonbow and Quick Impulse, when used with the Brave Bow, will be able to activate on that second hit, and the damage reduction from these deflect skills do work against special activations, so being able to reduce the damage from these high damaging specials is very important. For PvE, I would say that all of them only help the player because I don't think at the moment any enemies have Sacred Seals. That could be bad in the future if they do decide to give enemies these. For PvP, I think this benefits both offense and defensive teams, so actually makes it harder for you anyways, because it does provide more options against the one round KO meta, so this means that you should be able to survive better. However, this also might mean that taking out enemies becomes harder. Not really sure how everything will pan out. It honestly depends on what your opponent decides to put on their units and what crazy combinations people will come up with. You will also need to rely on decent HP and defensive or resistance stat. You can't just put these on squishy characters and expect them to survive. You also can't put it on characters who are chunked to half HP and expect them to survive a Brave hit. Honestly, while the 80% damage reduction is very strong, it won't save you a lot in situations where you have like half health or lower, in my opinion. So now with this knowledge, we can ask the question, are they worth it? And I would say for specific situations, yes. And this is for stuff like Reinhardt, who is obviously a very annoying character to face. People who have Brave weapons are very tough to take down, and they're very hard to bait because they can put out such a high amount of damage. And these Deflect Sacred Seals are definitely meant to hinder that one-hit KO potential. Anytime you can use it for a situation where your character gets hit 2 times in a row other than with a Brave weapon, I think that's just a plus. So regarding if you should enhance these Sacred Seals first, I think a lot of people saw like Deflect Magic and were instantly like, yes, I'm gonna enhance that one first to deal with Reinhardt. However, I think after taking a step back and realizing that they're very specific uses, I think their priority in enhancing first may not be as high, and obviously this is going to be different for every person. If you need something to counter Reinhardt, then sure, go ahead, enhance the Deflect Magic skill and give it to like a solid green unit. And I still think it's a solid secondary choice, so maybe you have some other higher priorities, but I think it's definitely worth looking into as like if you just want to decide on what to enhance next. So I know a lot of people are going to be asking, is the Distant Defense Sacred Seal a better choice to upgrade first? And in my opinion, I think it is. Personally, I'm going to be upgrading the Distant Defense Seal first, and that's because it's just a very simple flat increase in defensive and resistance stats against ranged attacks. And what that does for you is you can increase damage on specials that rely on those stats. It's also just a flat increase in damage and reduced damage against ranged attacks. And honestly, a lot of situations I'm not going to be running into Brave Bows or Dire Thunder every single time. So Distant Defense honestly can cover like every situation rather than just being super effective in one situation, which I think the Deflect Seals are very good at. But in my personal opinion, I want the utility to have just a very strong A skill that's in a Sacred Seal slot, and I can put it on anybody whenever I want. So those are my thoughts on the Deflect Sacred Seals, and honestly I don't have each of these at the 3rd tier upgrade, so if one of you who are watching this video, one of you guys like have any other experiences with these Deflect Sacred Seals, let me know in the comments. We can help everyone out, you know, try to figure out what's the best Deflect Sacred Seal. Like, who knows, maybe Deflect Melee on a certain unit with a certain skill setup is actually really strong. And honestly, I can't test out everything by myself, so it'd be really nice if anyone else has some other experience. Also, this is the 2nd type of video I've made where instead of looking at a specific hero or a specific skill, I decided that I wanted to take a look at a specific question that a bunch of people had. Like, honestly, I had a lot of questions regarding these Deflect Sacred Seals, and I had a lot of fun taking a deeper look into what exactly they are and how good they could be compared to like everyone's initial thoughts into what they were and how powerful they are. So let me know in the comments if you guys enjoyed these type of videos, and regardless, I'm probably gonna make a couple more of these regarding a few other questions or popular questions that people have. But you know, if you really like these videos, then let me know. I obviously want to try to make videos that people like to watch. So if you want more Fire Emblem Heroes content, then make sure you subscribe. I'm gonna be putting out more videos like this, and I already have a bunch of other videos in my Fire Emblem Heroes guides that cover different topics from skills to heroes to questions. And I'm definitely going to be making more of those. So until next time, I'll see you guys later.